In this video, we're going to look at how we can show trends over time using line charts and trend lines. Where you have change over time and you want to represent that graphically, a line chart can often be a very good choice. And you can see Rohan has already created a line chart tracking CO2 concentrations from 800,000 years ago to the present. What he would like to do next is zoom in on the most recent data from 1960 onwards. And again, he'd like to use a line chart. What he'd also like to do then is to get a projection for what our concentrations will look like in 10 years' time. So we're going to start by coming to our data, which is in the CO2 concentration tab. And we have the summarized version in the second group over here. And we're going to select our concentrations. Remember, we can't include our years to begin with. We'll add those later as labels. So clicking into G3, we're going to press Ctrl Shift down arrow, scroll up a bit, come to Insert, come to Line Charts, and we're going to choose a 2D line chart. Now we'd like this line chart to be exactly the same size as the one in the other sheet. So we're going to click on our Format tab, and on the far right we have the options to actually enter our height and width. So we're going to make this 14 by 24. And then if you like, you can just move the chart up a little bit. And we'd like to actually add some styling to this chart, and this is best done early. So come to our chart design, and if you hover over your designs, we will see some nice ones to choose from. Lines and removes your grid lines. The first fix we're going to have to make is to correct our horizontal axis. And this is much like we did in our first topic this week. We're going to come to select data. We're going to click edit under axis labels. And then we're going to come to F4 and press Ctrl Shift down arrow. You'll notice I've actually taken the years all the way up to 2028. And that's because when we add our trend line, we want those labels. And you haven't put them up front, you'll have to go and repeat this step. So we're just going to save ourselves a little bit of time, and we're going to say OK and OK. You'll see at the moment it's only going up to 2018 because our data goes up to that. But when we add our trend line, it will automatically add those other labels. Great. Now another fix we need to make is our heading. You can see, although this says CO2 correctly, that subscript has not come through in our heading here. So we will have to manually fix that. So click into our chart title, highlight the 2, and then we're going to come to our Home tab, come to the font group, and click the little drop down. Mac users, you'll need to go to your menu. And we're going to choose subscript. And OK, and that looks a lot better. Now because our data starts all the way up over 300, our curve looks very flat. And we already have the context from the first chart. So we're going to adjust the axis. So I'm going to double click on the axis to open up my panel. And then I'm going to come to axis options, and I'm going to start it at 300. You need to be a little careful with doing such a thing. In this case, it's fine, but it can be misleading in other cases. Because we have our previous chart, our data is no longer misleading. And now we would like to add a data label up here so we can see where our emissions got to in 2018. The problem is, if I just come in and turn on data labels, there are so many that it gets messy. So I'm going to turn those off. And what we're going to do is make sure you've clicked on your green line, and then we're going to click on one of the data points that's visible, and then just come to the end of the green line and select a single data point. And with just the one data point selected, if you turn your data labels on, you just get the one. So that looks great. Now let's add our trend line. If you come to chart elements, you'll see trend line down here. And clicking on the black arrow, it will give you a few options. But generally, you need to come into more options when you're working with trend lines. And then once you're in trend lines, click on the trend line options. There are 6 trend lines you can choose from, and these are covered in a bit more detail in your toolbox. By default, Excel will always select linear, that means a constant trend. We can see that's not what we've got here. So let's click on exponential. And it looks quite a lot better. But how do we know if it's better? There's an option to turn on an R-squared value. An R-squared value is a ratio. The higher the number and the closer it is to 1, the more closely the trend line resembles your existing curve. And just clicking back on my trend line, you can see with the linear it was 0.98, but with the exponential it's definitely a lot better. It's quite possible though that if you've got a dip in your curve, or in this case where it seems steeper than exponential, that you're still not getting as close a match as you'd like. So one option is then to try a polynomial. These can be all the way from order 2 through to an order 6 in Excel. And you can see for this data with a polynomial order 2, we've almost got an exact match. So we're going to turn off our R-squared, and now we're going to get a projection forward for 10 periods. So where it says forward, we're going to type in a 10, and because our periods are in years, it has put a projection all the way to 2028. Now unfortunately there's no option to add labels on trend lines, but there is quite a neat work around this. So we're going to come back to our trend line options, and we're going to display the equation. This is the equation that has been used to generate this trend line. What it's done, it's taken each data point, and remember these are just the numbers from 1 through to 69, and applied this equation to it. So to get our point here, all we need to do is substitute the x in this equation for the number 69. I'm going to click in and select that equation, Ctrl C to copy, come to a blank cell and paste, and now what I need to do is edit that equation. So I'm just going to double click, and we're going to get rid of the y, so we start with an equal sign, and then we're going to replace the x squared with the times by 69 to the power, shift 6 and 2, so that little caret 2 gives us to the power 2, and then I'm going to replace this x by just times 69, and then I'm going to press enter. And that is the value of the data point in 2028. Now if you'd like to decrease your decimal, you can do that on your number formatting. And then to get that into the chart, we're going to click on our chart, insert, shapes. We're going to grab a text box, pop our text box in there, and then come into our formula bar, type equals, click on our cell and press enter. And then just resize your text box so that it sits nicely. And if you click back on your trend line, we can turn off your equation. One last thing, let's fix our horizontal axis. So click on your horizontal axis, come to positioning, and change your text direction to rotate 270 degrees. That's looking great. So we can now copy this chart. Click on the edge, Ctrl C, come to your line and area charts, click in P3 and paste. So we've just seen how we can use line charts and trend lines to visualize trends in our data.